Welcome to Betrayed and Broken S. Enjoy watching. We hope you will have fun with us. It was supposed to be just another quiet summer weekend in the countryside. Isla had always loved animals, especially horses. Her uncle's ranch had been her favorite place since childhood, a peaceful escape where nothing ever went wrong. So when she arrived that afternoon, boots, dusty and heart-light, she never imagined that a simple visit to the stables would change her life forever. The horse was new, tall, dark, with eyes that seemed to understand more than any animal. Should the ranch hands called him Shadow. He wasn't like the others, restless, intense, almost too aware. Isla had been warned. He was unpredictable, but she wasn't afraid. There was something about him that pulled her in. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe something deeper. The first time she reached out to him, he flinched, but the second time he came closer and closer still. Her heart raced. The air around them grew heavy. It felt strange, like time had slowed down. She laughed it off and gently stroked his neck, unaware that she had just crossed an invisible line. From that moment on, things started to shift. Shadow began showing up where he shouldn't, outside her window at night, following her silently across the fields. Lights flickered in the barn, doors creaked open. With no one there and Isla, she started dreaming things she couldn't explain. No one believed her, not at first, but the fear in her eyes started to say what words couldn't. Something wasn't right, and the more she tried to stay away, the more drawn, and she felt like Shadow wasn't just a horse anymore, like he was something else entirely. That night, she made one final visit to the stable. What she saw waiting inside would change everything forever. Isla stepped into the stable that night with trembling hands. The wooden door creaked behind her, closing softly on its own, though no wind had followed her, in her flashlight, flickered as she swept it across the hatron floor. The other horses were silent, too still, like they were holding their breath, and then she saw him, Shadow, standing at the far end, eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. He didn't move, just watched her. Isla whispered his name. Her voice catching in her throat, the same chill that had followed her for days settled over her skin. She hadn't told anyone she was coming back to the stable. She couldn't explain why she felt the need to. It was like something inside her was pulling her here, something stronger than fear. Over the past week, things had only gotten stranger. Her phone had started glitching, showing static-filled images of the ranch. At odd hours, she'd hear hooves outside her cabin at night, though no one was out riding. Even her uncle had started acting different, nervous, avoidant, brushing off her questions with halves, smiles and long silences. Isla tried researching Shadow's past, but there was barely any information. He'd been brought in from an auction just a month ago. No name, no history, no records of ownership. *********. One of the stable hands mentioned something about the horse being passed from ranch to ranch, never staying long before people got spooked. Another claimed he saw Shadow staring at an empty corner of the barn for hours, like he was watching someone no one else could see. Isla couldn't stay away. It wasn't just fear. It was fascination, like Shadow knew something she didn't like. He was trying to tell her something, but what? She took a step closer and Shadow finally moved, just a small shift of weight, but enough to stir the straw beneath him. His ears flicked and his head tilted slowly, eyes never leaving hers. Then, from the shadows behind him, she heard something else, a sound she couldn't explain, not a naic, not a breath, a whisper. She froze. Whatever was happening, it wasn't just about the horse anymore. Something old, something hidden on this land had been awakened, and Isla was already in too deep to walk away. Isla stood frozen in the middle of the stable, that strange whisper still echoing faintly in her ears. It didn't sound like it came from a horse. It was more human, soft, like someone murmuring from the darkness. She turned quickly, but no one was there, just the rustle of hay and the heavy silence that followed. Shadow took a step forward, his hooves oddly silent on the wooden floor. Isla backed up, unsure if she was more afraid of the sound or what it meant. The next morning, she tried to bring it up with her uncle over breakfast. He stirred his coffee and looked tired. Older somehow, like the nights had been wearing on him too. When she mentioned the whispers, he didn't even look up. "You need rest." He muttered, "You've been spending too much time near that horse." Then he got up and left the table. Later that day, Isla found one of the ranch hands, Benjamin, fixing a fence near the back pasture. He was younger, maybe a year or 3 older than her, and always seemed to keep his distance. But today he looked like he wanted to talk. She asked him straight out, "Do you think something's wrong with Shadow?" He hesitated, glanced around, then nodded slowly. "I don't go near him anymore," he said. "None of us do. Animals act weird around him. Dogs won't bark near the stable. One of the Mars kicked down her stall just to stay away." Isla asked him if he'd ever heard whispering. Benjamin's face changed. He didn't answer, just picked up his tools and walked away. That night, the dreams got worse. Isla saw flashes of fire, a woman running through the woods, and shadows, standing over something she couldn't quite see. Every time she woke up, her sheets were damp with sweat, her heart pounding like she'd actually been there. In one dream, she was in the barn again, but it wasn't hers. It was older, burned at the edges, and something was trapped inside. She kept hearing a voice calling her name from behind the stalls. When she turned to look, she'd always wake up. Before she could see the face, she started to suspect that Shadow wasn't the cause, but the key. Something had happened long ago, something buried, and now it was finding a way back, and Isla, for reasons she couldn't yet explain, was caught right in the center of it. Isla didn't sleep the next night. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt something watching her, not just a feeling. It was stronger than that, like a weight pressing down on her. T, growing heavier with each passing hour. The whispering had returned clearer this time and closer. It didn't come from the stable anymore. It was inside her room. She packed a flashlight, a notebook, and a rusted key. She found in her uncle's old toolbox the same key that matched a locked cabinet in the barn. She'd never been allowed to open. The night air was cold and still as she made her way back to the stable. Her boots barely crunched over the dirt path, and Shadow's stall glowed faintly under the moonlight, leaking through the broken roof panels. Inside, the horses were restless again, ears twitching, eyes wide. They shifted nervously as she passed, but Shadow stood calm, almost waiting. Isla didn't approach him this time. Instead, she walked toward the back wall to the cabinet with the iron handle. Her hands trembled as she slid in the key. It turned with a heavy click, and the door creaked open. Inside, she found old photos, black and white images of the ranch decades ago. But in nearly every photo, there was a girl with dark braids standing next to a horse that looked just like Shadow. One photo had the name Harper scribbled on the back and a date. 1964. There were newspaper clippings, too yellowed with age. One headline stood out. "Local girl trampled to death at Briar Hollow Ranch. Horse put down after tragic incident." But Shadow hadn't been put down. He was still here. Isla stumbled back, breath catching. She remembered the burned barn from her dreams. This wasn't the first time something terrible had happened here, and now, whatever had started back then was beginning again. Suddenly the air shifted, the flashlight flickered, then went dark. A turn. Shadow was gone, his stall empty. The other horses whinnied and kicked against their stalls. Somewhere behind her, a door slammed shut, and then footsteps, slow, heavy, not human, not quite animal either. They echoed off the wooden walls, growing louder, closer. She pressed herself against the cabinet, heart racing, breath shallow. Whatever was coming, it knew she was here. Isla's back pressed hard against the cold wood of the cabinet as the footsteps grew louder. The stable, once filled with distant creaks and shuffling horses, was now drowned in silence. Except for those slow, deliberate steps. Every instinct told her not to move, but something deep inside urged her to look. She turned slowly, raising the dim beam of her dying flashlight there. Standing in the center aisle where Shadow's stall had been was not just the horse, but a figure beside him. It was a girl. She looked no older than 16, her dress torn and dirty, her hair wet and tangled with straw. Her eyes were wide and empty, and yet somehow they seemed to lock straight onto Mina's. The girl didn't speak. She simply stood there, one hand resting gently on Shadow's mane like they belonged together. Then, just as suddenly as she had appeared, the light blinked out completely. Isla blinked, trying to adjust to the darkness. Her breath was loud in her ears, heart pounding. She reached out blindly, gripping the edge of the cabinet for balance when she switched on her phone's flashlight. Both the figure and the horse were gone, but the cabinet was no longer empty. A small leather journal sat where the photos had been. It hadn't been there before. She picked it up, fingers trembling, and flipped through the brittle pages. The writing was uneven, panicked. It was Harper's diary. The entries told of dreams just like Isla's whispers, the same cold feeling. But the most chilling part was near the end. Harper hadn't been trampled like the article claimed. Her last entry described a night when she tried to set Shadow free, convinced he was being used for something darker. The final line read, "He's not the one who hurt me. He tried to save me. Something else." Isla's mind raced. If Shadow wasn't the threat, what was outside? Thunder cracked loud enough to shake the walls. Rain pounded the roof as wind rushed through the cracks. Then from deep in the barn's far side, she heard the unmistakable sound of a latch turning, a door opening. She crept toward it, following the sound, her phone shaking in her grip. It led her to the old storage loft, abandoned for years. She climbed the ladder one step at a time, the wood groaning under her weight. At the top, she found a long-forgotten trunk. Inside she discovered scorched objects, a child's dress, a broken lantern, an old charm necklace half melted. These weren't just random things. These were from the fire, the same fire she'd seen in her dreams. But what chilled her more than anything was the smell, smoke fresh, and then she saw it. A thin wisp of black smoke curling from the corner of the loft. Not old, not imagined. Something was burning, and it wasn't part of the past anymore. The fire had come back, and this time it was starting with her. Isla's heart raced as the smoke thickened around her. The memories from the diary, the dreams, the whispers. All of it collided in her mind like pieces of a puzzle falling into place. She realized the fire wasn't just returning. It was trying to repeat what happened all those years ago, whatever dark force had taken. Harper hadn't been finished. It had waited silent and patient for someone like Isla to come too close. She grabbed the charm necklace from the trunk and clutched it tightly, remembering the final words from Harper's journal. "He tried to save me." Isla turned and climbed down the ladder, coughing through the smoke. The barn groaned as flames licked the ceiling above, glowing orange in the beams. In the chaos, she heard the panicked cries of the other horses, but Shadow was there, standing calmly in the open, his eyes locked on hers. Without thinking, Isla ran to him as she placed the charm gently on his neck. The fire around them seemed to shift. The heat pulled back for just a moment, like the air itself was hesitating. Then came the sound again, that soft whisper, but this time not terrifying. It was a farewell. A sudden gust of wind swept through the stable, slamming open the doors. The fire, as if drawn out, raced toward the exit and vanished into the stormy night. Rain followed hard, soaking the ground and extinguishing what was left. In the days that followed, Isla stayed on the ranch. She told her uncle everything. This time he listened. He admitted Harper was his older sister. The girl no one talked about. Her death had always felt like a lie, buried under fear and guilt. Together they cleaned the barn, rebuilt the stalls, and laid Harper's belongings to rest on the hill behind the ranch. Shadow remained peaceful now, his strange presence no longer filled with dread. Isla knew the darkness had been tied to the truth, being hidden for too long, and once it was brought into the light, it lost its grip. From then on, whenever she walked by the stables, she felt something warm instead of cold, like someone was finally at peace. The whispers were gone, the dreams had stopped, but one thing stayed with her. Some stories aren't just meant to be remembered. They're meant to be finished, and this one finally. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like, and leave a comment. If you enjoyed this story, this will help us create even more exciting stories just for